G'day there, James here, and welcome to episode 4, season 2, comparing policies to principles, why a government can never work and what to do instead. So in this series, we're looking at 263 different government policies and comparing them to the principles of objective morality to see whether or not we can actually do any of these things that we've been doing for so long. We think it's normal to use violence as a first resort rather than a last resort. Punishment as a necessary good rather than seeing it as the evil that it actually is. This is the investigation this series is doing and providing principle solutions, not looking at all the concretes out there because people are very good at coming up with empirical and rationalistic concretes. But all their examples are wrong because their premises are wrong because their principles are fundamentally flawed. You have to have the right principles to establish your premises, to then give the right concrete examples of how to fix a problem. Otherwise, you just end up creating worse and worse problems, like we're going to see today with narcotics, drugs, whether drugs should be legalized, illegal, criminalized, decriminalized, what the solutions are, what the problems are, what to do, what not to do, what countries in the world are doing currently, good and bad. So if you haven't watched all the previous videos in this series, it is highly recommended to do that because this is a big series teaching you the principles about practically everything to do with society. Because that's what government's done. It's put its octopus tentacles in every aspect of society, controlled it all, and fucked it all up to the point of absolute devastation. So we need to learn, how can we actually create a healthy, functioning society? Because most people have no idea. So they cling desperately to the system of obliteration that keeps on destroying the quality of life in so many aspects all around the world, every single day getting worse and worse, because they just don't know the alternatives. And that's what this series is about, teaching you the alternatives, the truth behind natural societies, and how this could all work properly. Because when it comes down to it, most of it is really quite simple. But if you have the wrong premises, you're always going to come up with the wrong solutions to fixing problems because you need to learn the principles behind everything. And this episode will touch on that and go deeper into learning about drugs. So with that being said, let's crack into it. Narcotics. Should drugs such as cannabis and heroin be legalized? Supporters suggest that it is the crime associated with the buying black market drugs that cause problems, and legalizing narcotics would reduce crime. Opponents point to the health risks and say it would be giving in to criminals. There's a saying that the worst thing about illegal drugs is that they're illegal. Why? Because that's what happens. The black market springs up, and they make the drugs more poisonous and toxic and deadly. Like the fentanyl crisis that's happening in Portland, Oregon, in America, and Vancouver, in Canada. These places have been totally destroyed because there was a decriminalization of the drugs, but there was none of the supporting factors to cure the problem. It was just a government experiment to see how many people they can kill and terrorize on the streets, and I'll explain in detail why. But first, we need to look at the principle of objective morality. Do you have the right to tell me what to do with my body? No, absolutely not. I don't have the right to tell you what to do with your body. As long as you're not using your body to cause harm to others, you have the right to self-harm. If you wish to take heroin, to smoke weed, to snort cocaine, you have that right to do so. It's your body, your choice. With that being said, the goal is not to encourage everyone to go out there and try heroin or fentanyl or any other crazy drugs. That's not the point here. The point is to solve the problem of people using drugs and destroying their lives. If drugs didn't cause problems, there wouldn't be any problems. It's the fact that they do cause problems to those people who use them. Not everyone, but a small amount and in some places more than others, they do cause problems. What are those problems that people are concerned about? They're concerned when people cause self-harm and even commit suicide as a result of taking drugs, becoming unproductive, inflicting violence upon others and raping others, committing theft, and just being a general public nuisance. These are the crimes that are associated with drug use. And when it comes to most things to do with crime, prevention is always better than correction. You want to prevent the crimes from happening in the first place. Where you see the opposite happening in most countries in the world, where they're trying to correct the problem by using law enforcement, getting police and gangs. They're trying to have a war on drugs, a war on terror, a war on cancer, just war with everything, which easily gives away the principles, the premises of these people in positions of power. They're either incoherent, incompetent fools, or they're sadistic, evil parasites that know exactly what they're doing. Because, an adjustment on Albert Einstein's words, you have to be a bloody fool if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result. That's what the war on drugs is. That's what making drugs illegal is doing, criminalizing drugs is doing, creating problem after problem after problem. We get that. Yes, drugs are bad for the individual, for their family, and for society. The goal here is to achieve no drug use, or only that safe recreational drug use that people can comfortably and appropriately manage for themselves and not become an addict and start becoming unproductive and destroying their lives and going in a downward spiral, ending up on the streets and causing harm to others. Safe and responsible drug use? Okay. That's fine. What we want to get rid of is all that bad drug use. That's what everyone in the world can agree upon. We want to get rid of that bad drug use that destroys people's lives. No one wants that unless they're in government. The best way to achieve that, of no bad drug use, is to look at the evidence available of what doesn't work and what works from the countries who have been using stupid strategies to the countries that have been using better, more intelligent strategies to address the problem of drugs.
At a Portuguese incineration plant, the drug squad prepares to burn their latest haul. For years, Portugal took a hard-line approach to drugs.
The policy was that all people caught with drugs, regardless of the amount and even if they were for their own personal use, will be legally prosecuted as drug traffickers. They will be brought into court and they may be sentenced to some time in prison. But the hardline approach didn't make a difference regarding people stopping use drugs.
State resources could be focused on addicts. Instead of being punished for their dependency, they'd be offered help.
It's easy to them to get to us and say, okay, I have a drug problem and I need help. They don't have to lie to us. It's like, okay, I'm using and I'm not afraid to get in jail or something like that. And I think this is a big, big difference, you know.
Since decriminalisation, drug-induced deaths have dropped from 80 in 2001 to just 16 in 2012. Over the same period, the total number of heroin addicts halved. But after 4 years in office, he seemed to have made little lasting impact.
What you see is no matter what you do, the drugs gets to the US. You have to look for a solution. We know that just repression, just prohibitionism doesn't work. We know it for certain. We have lived that.
We need to adhere to the principles of objective morality, because if we deviate from that, we're worse than the drug users and the drug dealers. And any credibility of trying to cling to the idea of doing the right thing falls off the edge of a cliff. We need to innovate new ideas to solve these problems that have been around for generations. And we need to do it without resorting to violence as the first and only option. Yes, their use should be discouraged, not encouraged, but not by enforcing a stigma that you are a degenerate criminal if you use drugs, but with the approach that you're sick and you have a mental health issue and you need help. It shouldn't be a stigma that you're a bad person for using drugs, but rather that you're going through a bad time. And I can attest to this fact. I've been on the bad side of drug use myself. When I abused weed, I used to smoke far too much weed. I was addicted to it because I was mentally unhappy. I was depressed because of looking into the state of the world, researching the world coming out of the pandemic. I felt hopeless. I felt powerless. I saw how evil the world is and how many problems there are and how insurmountable and difficult these challenges appear to be. And the fact that no one seemed to care. Everyone was doing things to make their lives worse and just bending the knee. And I didn't want to be in this world, so I would smoke weed, joints, bongs, you name it, just to escape. I mean, there was a lot of factors which I did enjoy as well, as a social thing, and it was a pleasurable thing to do. It was fun. But was it good for me overall? Well, absolutely not, because it ended up resulting in a psychosis. And perhaps if there was better rehabilitation methods out there, which I'll explain later, that wouldn't have happened because I had mini psychoses earlier on, years before, multiple of them. They just weren't that bad. Well, they were bad, but they're only for one night, where I had this psychosis and it was the worst experience of my life. And I did end up doing some dangerous things as well. And I got arrested by police. And that was probably the first time I've ever been arrested by police, and it was legitimate. So, well done, they actually did something right. But it wasn't as police, they did it in the capacity of men, because police can't do anything right. But as men, of course they had the right to arrest me in that state I was in, because I was a danger to myself and to others. And I have no problem with admitting that, because now I've gone through that. I can see with a much clearer perspective on the inside of what drug use is like, and drug abuse. And I know what doesn't work, and what does work. So I was arrested and taken to a mental health facility on the Gold Coast. Some good things about this facility, but there were more things that were not good. So when people go into a mental health facility, you should not be feeding them absolute junk, garbage food. That only made matters worse for myself. You should not be offering the patients in there more drugs. As soon as they get in there, they're trying to offer me more drugs, and even in my fucking cooked out brain, going through a literal psychotic event, I still had the dignity, integrity, and responsibility to decline their drugs. I said, I've arrived here because I've fucked my mind up from drugs. I don't want to take more of your drugs. It's just going to make things worse. And they kept on constantly pushing the drugs onto me, waking me up in the middle of the night. In the morning, I couldn't sleep properly. I was getting insomnia. It was terrible. There was no psychological support. They just throw you into an area and hope you get better. And I did, but I had to do all the work myself. There was a couple times I found people to help, but the psychological support just wasn't there. The drug use was there, but it was not meant to be there because it's a place to recover from using and taking and abusing drugs, which was abysmal. It was a really big letdown. In the drugs that they were giving people there, because there were other patients in this facility with me, they were saying that there's lithium in the drugs, and there actually is. They give the patients these drugs with lithium, and lithium's in a battery. That's poisonous shit. And apparently it keeps the crazy people in there calm and essentially stops them from being able to leave because it fries their brain even more. So I had to struggle and fight with myself to be able to overcome what was going on in my mind, because going through a psychosis, I tell you now, that was 3 weeks of insanity. It was practically literally being insane, not being able to discern truth from fiction, going crazy. And I tell you right now, in the past, years before that, I've gone through 6 months of suicidal depression, and that was a walk in the park compared to 3 weeks of this psychosis. So there are serious dangers from smoking weed. Sure, most people don't respond negatively to weed, but some people do. And I've known other people who've had serious reactions to weed. But the way to solve that problem is not by pointing guns at people and killing them and saying, well, you're not even saying anything because you fucking killed them, locking them up. Because this is what happens in some countries. The Philippines, if you use drugs, they just go and shoot you.
Crime and drug-infested shanties of the Philippine archipelago have been turned into a drug war zone, in the 5 bloody years of Rodrigo Duterte's presidency.
It's not a dog, my son. It's not a dog or a pig to kill like them.
The 6,000 killed by police, by their own accounting, a reign of terror, openly incited by the president himself.
If you have to shoot them dead. And this is what is the human rights idiots are trying to complain. You know, when I say I shoot them dead, I'd prefer to shoot them in the heart or in the head. If you insist on a drug war, I will kill you all. I will kill you.
President Duterte has denied he's ever ordered police to kill suspects.
And essentially, if you're in Australia or any other country where drugs are illegal, if you're just using the drugs, obviously you haven't done anything wrong, but if the police come to get you and you defend yourself because you have the right to self-defense, they'll fucking kill you. So, as I've said in the past videos, legality is a threat of execution. That is the problem. That's a problem far, far worse than using drugs. The cure is worse than the disease. And it doesn't even fix anything, it makes it worse. Because whenever they try to enforce these laws and get their thugs to stop people from using drugs, these black markets spring up, which produce worse quality drugs, which make the people who use them go even crazier, commit more violence, more rapes, more thefts, and more deaths from overdose. Whereas if it was not illegal and there was a proper marketplace for it, there'd only be high quality drugs that were being sold that aren't laced with fucking poisonous shit. So essentially with my journey, I had to learn the hard way. I had to go through a psychosis to stop smoking tobacco and stop smoking weed, but I did it. It would have been much preferable if there were better systems in place. For those people who are against decriminalizing drugs and allowing people the freedom and right to do with their body as they please, if you personally took drugs, should you be locked up for a year, 2 years, 3 years? And that person, they always say, well, I wouldn't use drugs. No. Let's say you have. You have right now. That's the idea of empathy. If you can't put yourself in other people's shoes and have the ability to be empathetic, you're a psychopath. Your voice doesn't count by that point, if you're literally unable to do that. So no, you wouldn't want to be locked up for a year or any point of time if you took drugs and you actually didn't do anything. If you caused harm, sure, but not being locked up in prison, a rehab centre, because you need to get better, not worse. And when it comes to sellers, because we're going to look at Portugal. Portugal is a prime example of how decriminalising drugs and having rehabilitation systems actually lowers drug rates significantly, lowers death, and it's a much, much better system for attacking that problem. And attacking is not even the right word, that's their terminology. But for fixing a problem and healing and helping people to recover from their mental health issues. Because drug abuse and even most drug use is literally just coming from mental health issues, childhood trauma, and whatever other problems have gathered in their life, which is normal. That just happens with people. So the seller should not be punished for making a voluntary exchange. Because Portugal, they decriminalized it for the users, but not for the dealers, not for the sellers, which is silly. But still, it's planet Earth with a government, so what do you expect? They can't do everything right. They're not a natural, free, private society yet, but that's the point. That's why we're doing this. I'm here to tell you the way it should be done, because these are the facts. Because you can figure this out with your own mind. And look at the evidence, see what works, see what doesn't work. You don't need to be an expert and study this field for years and years. You can spend one day, 5 hours investigating this and be able to figure out the truth for yourself. So when you look at Portland and Vancouver,
This is Vancouver, Canada, a city that made every drug legal. Drug addiction, overdoses, homelessness, and crime.
Drive. All drugs are good and balanced. God made all drugs.
A few side effects of decriminalizing every drug since January 2023. The city's goal was to make using drugs safer by making them legal, but many Canadians think it's done the exact opposite. So I went to downtown Vancouver with my friend Kevin, a social worker and drug addiction specialist, to see the impact decriminalizing drugs has had on the city. People are smoking fentanyl, smoking crack out here.
Yeah, it's
just straight fentanyl, straight meth, straight crack.
It's definitely the most concentrated group of people of any city you and I have ever visited. Yeah, we've only done one block. We've been out here for 5 minutes. It's just complete chaos. There's offices right here. Can you imagine working here full time?
Considering the new laws here, I wanted to hear what kind of drugs the people here were using and how easy it was to get their hands on them. Are you on trank right now? Is that why you're nodding out?
I don't know, I might be. More drugs, better.
Okay.
As you can see, it's a bloody mess. It's a nightmare. And the government is just fueling this. It's just an experiment to see how many people they can get to kill themselves through drug use. Why? Because they're giving out money. They're saying, here's the money, go buy your drugs. In a real world, when people are going to be drug addicts, they need to pay for that drug addiction. Where are they going to get money from if there's no government mafia monopoly handing them checks to go buy it? They have to work to earn that money, to pay for drugs. That's what happens in a real world, a natural society. None of this unnatural bullshit we're living through and we accept as normal. It's a total opposite of normal, this world, this society. It's everything wrong. Society today is how to do everything wrong. And the way to do it right is not by giving welfare checks to people who are drug addicts to buy drugs. So you tell me, how are they going to get money to pay for drugs? The next answer after getting taxation theft is to steal themselves. They call it boosting. To go and steal. But now when they're doing that, they're committing a real crime because it's not just self-harm anymore or being a public nuisance, it's stealing. So then what you'd do is you'd have private security companies that take care of that in conjunction with private arbitration centres and rehabilitation centres, all working together to fix that problem. Just from that alone, not giving them money to pay for drugs, you're going to lower the drug use, the extreme drug addicts, exponentially. It'll be a huge drop because how are they going to get it now? Too hard. Only a small percentage of them are actually going to steal things to pay for their drug use. And those ones that do will be caught and they will be fixed. They will go through a proper justice system to correct and cure that criminal behavior. But prevention is a solution. We need better prevention systems. A way to have sound drug addiction prevention methods is through proper business methods. So you have a private business and they specialize in rehabbing people, getting them back on their feet. So they're comprised of counselors, psychologists, social workers, and what they could do is they have a weed psychosis night or any other drug event, and it's a free lead magnet, an offer. Those who are in the entrepreneur space understand what a lead magnet is. It's something you put out there for free to attract clients to bring them in for an offer where you can charge them money for something. So you have these event nights, you take away that stigma and you encourage the stigma of reality that drug use is just a mental health issue and that we're here to help. We're not here to put you down or treat you like a rabid dog. And so these rehab companies, they offer these free events. And they can do this in person with workshops or online with an automated webinar or a live webinar. And they help to heal the underlying issues which spark that drug use. And what they do then is they attract these people earlier in their drug journey, before they've got to the level of psychosis, before they've overdosed on fentanyl or started injecting with heroin. They start to learn about these drugs because it's pushed out there, it's in front of them. It's on the Facebook ads, it's on the Google searches, it's on Instagram ads and whatever other social media is there. There's signposts around town. This advertising is out there. And how can they afford to do that? Because it's a business. They put out all this free stuff. people learn and they get help and they know where to go if they do need help more seriously later on. And then these businesses offer to upsell them into one-on-one coaching and psychology. So a business holds an event, there's 20, 50 people there, and then they offer these corrective programs and solutions to people for a fee. If they can't pay the price up front, they can pay it over a payment plan. And in a worst case scenario, if the people don't have enough money at all to pay for these solutions, they can be funded by the community's donations, because I can guarantee you the community will be willing to pay money for these people to get better, because they don't want to see them on the streets. They don't want to be attacked and be walking home at night and be afraid that they're going to be raped or killed by a drug addict. They'd be happy to all chip in a little bit to pay for these people to get better, to clean up their streets. That's as a last resort. As a first resort is to get people to pay their own way before they get to that breaking point. Prevention is better than correction after the fact. Prevent the psychosis, prevent the overdoses, prevent the crimes from happening before they happen through intelligent, laissez-faire capitalistic methods. And even getting this idea into schools earlier on. You want to educate kids early on what to do if you have drug problems, because how many kids and how many people use drugs? So most people throughout their lives have used drugs at least once, like 90%. Don't quote me on that stat, but everyone you know has done drugs before. Even that person who never does drugs, ask them when they were younger, they probably would have done drugs once, right? And it can go bad. So we all need to know together, what are the solutions? What do we do? We don't want to feel like we're going to be killed by police for taking a drug. We want to feel like, hey, there's help out there. I can get help if I need it. That the aliens aren't coming to get me, or I'm going crazy, and all this other bizarre things that you think when you're going through a hard time and you've overdosed, or just when you're in a bad mental place, which is all too common today, and it's understandable why when you look at the world. We want to encourage people to believe that it's strong and the right thing to do to get help when they're having drug issues or wanting to take drugs for the first time. Get help before it comes to that. Or when they're in the thick of it, that it's still strong and the right thing to do to get help to get out of that hole. So there's a whole new stigma we can build around the idea of drug use that will have a tremendous effect on lowering the amount of drug addicts and violent crimes surrounding drug use. In those cases where the drug addicts have really gone too far, they've overdosed and they've done some really bad things on the streets, what you do then is you have the private security companies take them to the courts, the private arbitration centres. They look at the evidence, they go through their normal due process, and they see that, yes, this person has a problem. All right, instead of sending him into prison and torturing him to get worse, okay, you're going to rehab. You don't have any say in the matter because you're off your fucking head and drugs. Okay, let's take you there. And they take them there and they get better. But who pays for that? Well, there's multiple ways that can be paid for. So the local private security companies can charge a little bit extra in their fees to everyone else because they know in that area there's a high drug use. So instead of $100 a month, it could be $105 a month. And that's just what the company charges because it's an inbuilt fee. And they tell their customers that, hey, we charge a little bit more because there's a high drug use of homeless bums who are drug addicts in our city. And we know a lot of them don't have any money, but they need help. So the extra $5 a month you're paying, and there's hundreds of people who are getting protection from these private security companies who are paying for it just like insurance. Everyone has insurance on their cars or ambulance cover or house insurance. It's the same thing with your private security insurance and your cover. That cost is covered there. So that's one really intelligent, innovative way to be able to cover the cost for these people that need help. And what about the arbitration centres? Well, they can charge, again, a little bit more to everyone else that has money to be able to afford their dispute management and conflict resolution, to be able to cover the cost of those people who don't have any money. And this is just one way. Another way is that when that mentally disabled person who is disabled at the moment because they've been drug afflicted, when they go to rehab, they undertake the courses in there, and you look at all the places in the world and you figure out what's going to be the best drug rehabilitation course in the world. And you mash all the best pieces that you find and you put that into one system. So Portugal, again, has had lots of success, so I'm sure you'll model most of what they're doing and add in what other countries, perhaps like Norway with their prison systems, how successful they've been over there for rehabbing people from traditional crimes that aren't drug related, and even drug related too. And you build a fantastic system that has the highest chance of success for turning these zombies back into normal, healthy, productive, meaningful people.
Existem duas equipas e vão ter que trabalhar como equipa.
In Lisbon, some of Portugal's most damaged, dependent people are trying to put their lives back together. And statistically, there's a far greater chance they'll recover here than almost any other place in the world. That's because in Portugal, drug addiction rarely kills anyone.
Não, ele ganhou, é verdade.
People arrive here and they are wounded.
Psychologist Sandra Simões oversees programs at the Typus Rehab Clinic, programs that help people rediscover joy in small things and learn to love their bodies again.
We deal with them in a new way. We build new relationships with them, and that is very important.
In all of Portugal, fewer than 30 people a year now die from drug overdoses. In British Columbia alone, hundreds die every year, and the province has struggled for decades to save lives. In 2016, after the lethal opioid fentanyl turned up, there were more than 900 deaths, creating a public health emergency and a new urgency for solutions. Arguably, no place in the world has had as much success dealing with addictions and overdoses as Portugal. Its system emphasizes harm reduction, treatment, and rehabilitation. And at the center of it is the idea that drug use is a health problem, not a crime. All drugs here, from marijuana to heroin, have been decriminalized. Drug traffickers are still hunted down and prosecuted, but if you're caught using, you won't be sent to jail or get a criminal record or even end up in the justice system.
I think what we found out in Portugal after 15 years is that using any sort of stick or any sort of threat doesn't work.
Within a decade, the number of addicts in Portugal was cut in half. 90% of public money spent fighting drugs now goes towards treatment and prevention. Just 10% is spent on policing. In Canada, the most recent studies show the reverse, spending close to 70% on enforcement.
The profound thing about the decriminalization piece is that they sent a strong message to everybody, the public. It's politically supported that this is first and foremost a health and social issue.
It does prove that treating drug use like a health problem is the only way forward.
You have our experience, okay? It worked.
E agora vamos tentar bater com a bola uma vez no chão.
And what happens then is while they're still in the rehab center recovering, at the point where they can work inside the rehab center, because that's the traditional way for these rehab centers to recoup the costs of helping these people, is to have the people in there working their way and earning their way, so then they can get the luxuries that they want inside these facilities and to be able to repay the fees of entry for the security company to escort them safely into this location, for the arbitration company to hear the case and decide what to do and suggest a suitable rehabilitation facility, and for the rehab facility itself to pay for the food, the accommodation for the staff who are working to help these people get back on their feet and get back into the real world. So the private security companies, if they aren't called up by anyone, they'll end up acting like community protectors. For instance, if they're just general nuisance people that are overdosed on drugs constantly on the street, yelling and threatening at people, you can't have that on the streets. That's a crime itself because it's violating the peace, law number 4 of the law of morality, an element of objective morality. If you don't know this, go back to the earlier videos. That's all explained in great detail, and there's links to my pages where I've written extensively about this. These community protectors, who are just men working as private security agents, will act in their own rightful potential as community protectors, because anyone has the right to do that. That's the way they'll act, as a community protector. And they will take those people off the street, put them into a van, as little harm as possible to that drug addict who may be overdosing and causing problems and harm to other people, and transfer them and go through the right process to get them better. Not just leave them on the streets like countries do right now, like America and Canada, who are meant to be some of the first world countries in the world, who are beyond third world. Absolutely abysmal. They just leave them on the streets, let them shoot people, let them rape people, steal. The police don't do anything. We need real world solutions here. And most countries in the world have no idea. They don't want to fix the problem. They want to make the problem worse. Why? Because that's what they feed upon. That's why they're called politics. We can't just keep on focusing on the problems. We need to focus on the solutions, and that's what we're doing. So there needs to be much greater awareness about these rehab courses, about these counselors and psychologists and drug addict specializing companies. So companies that have a conglomeration of social workers, psychologists, counselors, they all work together to rehab people who have drug issues. There'll be one in every local community. Why? Because it's a business. And people don't want just the normal average man or woman who's not a drug addict, doesn't want drug addicts running around their town, committing crime and being a public nuisance, scaring them. No one wants that. We all want to fix that problem. That's why the idea of having this as a private business will be very powerful. And the reason why this isn't successful today is because government puts its hand up and says, we'll handle this, we're taking care of it. When you look at the real world, like I have with my own eyes going through that system, no, they don't. We need to step up our game and start behaving like grown-ups, like grown men and women that we actually are, and start fixing this properly, and not just handing the ball over to government and saying, here, you can do it all, and allowing them to turn what is a horrible thing already into an absolute cesspool. Because all they're doing is this harm reduction, having a safe needle spot, giving them fresh, clean needles so then they don't get sick. That's absolute nonsense. They don't get sick from sharing needles. They get sick because they're poisoning themselves with drugs. The whole HIV, AIDS, and all those other diseases are bullshit. It's all germ theory nonsense. The truth is, they're injecting poison into themselves, which is corroding their body and giving them AIDS and diseases. That's all that's happening here. So a safe needle spot, the government knows that's bullshit, and it's just the appearance of trying to do the right thing. Oh, we're doing something. We're giving them a safe place to inject themselves. So what really needs to happen is total decriminalization, total legalization. Well, no legality, get rid of all the legality in the first place. So what will happen then is that the black market would disappear. There will be no black market because there'll be professionals selling all these drugs. People can walk into a store and get whatever drugs they want. So what happens then is the quality is a lot higher, so the people who do want drugs will buy drugs and they'll be less damaging and deadly to themselves and to the community because they're a higher quality, higher standard. At the same time, in all those shops, there will be resources how to get help. There'll be phone numbers you can call, websites you can visit, directions to the building close by where there are people there ready to help. You don't need to pay for this help with taxpayers' money via a system of forced robbery. It's not necessary because donations and the people themselves can pay for it. And another problem with the black market is that sometimes in the cases when they don't make the drugs worse than what they should be, because fentanyl is apparently 50 times stronger than heroin, if you can imagine that. I've never used heroin, but I've heard that's one of the heaviest drugs you can use. 50 times stronger. People don't want that. They just want the heroin. They want the drug 50 times less strong. There might be a very small marginal amount of people that want the strong stuff, but they're probably going to die in a couple of weeks anyway. So what can also happen as an opposite effect of the extra hard style stuff is the low quality stuff. And this can spark violence too, because when someone spends money, sometimes a lot of money, on cocaine or heroin, and it's a dud and it doesn't work properly, those people then get violent and angry because the drugs they just bought aren't drugs. That's when a lot of violence happens as well. So if you legalize it, you'll have professional standards because these private companies won't want drug addicts coming back to retaliate and attack them because they just sold them crap, and they won't want to kill their customers, one, because they're making money selling them drugs, and two, they'll be getting referral commissions for sending those people to the rehabilitation centers. They can't get that money if their customers are dead because they sold them drugs that they shouldn't have. So the defenders of the drug extermination regime, which is the war on drugs to exterminate and kill every single last drug user, they say that drug use is a crime risk, and this validates, justifies their use of killing innocent people. So it's true that drugs can potentially be a crime risk. So can driving a car. But we need to look at the principles here. You can't commit an actual, real crime because of a future potential maybe crime. If the goal is to lower crime overall, the logic does not compute how performing more abundant and dangerous crimes can lower the crime levels. Sure, police Nazism may lower drug crimes a little bit, maybe, but it's inarguably, provably increasing far more serious crimes in the process, like unsubstantiated detainment, kidnap, torture, murder. So crime as a whole absolutely, inarguably goes up when there is a war on drugs. This is what happens when you try to fight a mental health issue. And there's also no evidence to say that banning drugs lowers drug use. It can even make it worse, and it does make it worse with the black markets. You can't say that you reduce crime via a war on drugs using criminal methods that you statistically dismiss as non-crimes. It's the very title. War! What is war? Don't you know what war is? What that word means? War means extreme violence, death, destruction on an unprecedented extreme scale. Sure, drugs may be a small problem, but in comparison to war, it's nothing. If a war on something is good, a war on everything must be better. Because at the end of the day, everyone will be safer because everyone will be dead. So that kind of thinking, to think a war on drugs even resembles somewhat of a reasonable idea, is just childish and foolish. So to recap, the solution is not to make drugs illegal and criminal. The solution is to legalize them, get rid of all legality, and to decriminalize it, and to offer rehabilitation systems that fix the problems, and to stop giving these bums and homeless people, drug addicts on the street, money to pay for their masochistic tendencies. When you get rid of the black market, stop funding these people in their self-destructive habits. When you have proper rehabilitation systems working in conjunction with private security companies that do their job, and arbitration centers who achieve justice, drug problem won't be a problem anymore. That being said, we're going to be looking at right to die now, which links in very closely with what we've just been talking about with right to use drugs, the right to do what you want to your body, the right to self-harm, the right to die. So although clearly punishing people for taking their own life is futile, even though I wouldn't put it past the government to try, the state often makes it a crime to assist in someone's early death, even if they are in great pain and are unable to carry out the act without help. Religions often take a dim view of suicide or those assisting in it, regardless of circumstances. So, what do I think? Well, it's not about what I think. It's about what is objectively true, and you have the right to die. If you've just been shot by a rocket launcher and you're missing half your bloody torso, and you beg your mate to shoot you in the head to put you out of your misery now because you know you're not going to survive, but you might be lying there in agony for another 2 minutes before you bleed out, your friend has a moral responsibility as a friend to shoot you in the head and put you out of your misery, to end your life and your extreme agony at that moment, because that is the morally right thing to do. If someone has Alzheimer's and every other cure hasn't worked and they're lying in their deathbed and they're suffering, they're in pain and they're suffering from delusions and going through torture, they have the right to be euthanized, as does any other old person who's past their time and they want to leave. Everyone has the right to do that. Should there be measures to prevent that before they die? Well, yes, of course. You want to be using effective methods to heal people if they can be healed, to get better. If that guy who was hit by a rocket launcher had access to technology which could instantly regrow his lower body, okay, sure, don't shoot him in the head then. Let's fix him if we can. If we have that technology and he consents to it, of course. That old person with Alzheimer's lying in the bed about to die, if we can fix that, sure. But if we don't have that available, they have the right to die. That is the morally right thing to do, rather than watching them suffer and seeing them going through cruel agony. That's not right. It's wrong to deny people from such a simple method, euthanasia, to be able to take their own life and to pass in peace. If you are opposed to that idea, you are objectively supporting evil. The only somewhat reasonable case could be for young people or people who are just depressed and mentally unstable but physically healthy, who are wanting to kill themselves. That's when you come in and intervene with other methods of rehabilitation to help their mental health with psychology and counsellors and programs and courses and support from family and friends and whatever other organisations are willing to help that person not jump off a building and not kill themselves. Sure, they have the right to do that, but we want to try and help them before they get to that, because I felt suicidal in the past and I'm glad I didn't take my life, because I'm here right now to talk about what we're doing today and how you have the right to die, but you necessarily shouldn't act on that. And having the right support can be very helpful. I didn't have the right support when I was going through tough times, and I really had to rely on my own inner strength to get through when I did. But it would have been easier if those facilities were available to me. I think it's a fantastic idea. So yes, you absolutely do have the right to die, the right to self-harm, the right to do with your body whatever you please. But we also, the rest of us who don't want to kill ourselves or take drugs, we have the right to help you. And I know, that is a much, much better way to view life, the world, and correcting problems, is by finding solutions. And you only ever find the right solutions when you fix your principles, you fix your premises, and then you can come up with concrete examples. Because if your principles are, I live by faith, God, the government authority, is what is right. I don't know any objective truth, and subjectivity is all there is. If that's your principle, you have a premise that, I want society to be good. I don't want to see drug addicts and homeless people on the street. So my premise, therefore, is whatever it takes to clean that up is right. Because my principles are subjective, based on God, authority, whatever, my own irrational feelings and beliefs. When you have the wrong principles, you have the wrong premises, you come up with the wrong answers to problems, and you end up creating more problems. So let's fix the principles, fix the premises, fix the solutions, and make solutions. And we can do that. We're doing that right now. So in the next video, we're going to be looking at prisons and touching and going deeper on rehabilitation centers, because I've already told you many times that's the solution to punishment and torture with prisons, is rehabilitation and remedy. And we're going to be taking a bit of a look at Halden Prison in Norway. So stay tuned, and I'll see you there. Bye-bye.